You're listening to the DC Real Estate Podcast, the podcast where we focus exclusively on all things local to the DMV area. Local investors, local knowledge, local experts. Our journey starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of the DC Real Estate Podcast. My name is Russell Brazil. I am an associate broker with the District Invest Group of Arlo Real Estate.
I'm Jack Seiden. I am owner of DMV Flippers and also a real estate salesperson with the District Invest Group.
And I'm Sarah, also a salesperson with the District Invest Group.
Wow, that's kind of funny that we're all on the same podcast.
Yeah, what a weird coincidence.
What a weird coincidence.
So we're talking this week about market conditions. Market conditions are out of control. They've been out of control for 2 years, but it seems to be just spiraling downward or upward if you're a seller, right? So it depends what side of this coin that you're on.
But Russell, when there's no more houses for sale, like zero houses, what are you going to do for a living? We're getting there. We're getting close to that.
I'm gonna have to pump up more podcast content when that happens, so I can get sponsors, right?
Yeah.
So, Sarah, you just had a situation the other day where tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's hard for any agent right now, but this guy wanted to see this property in Baltimore, and I was like, all right, this is great. Like, I'll schedule a showing. Went in, made a showing request, and literally like 20 minutes later, the property had gone on market that morning. 20 minutes later, your showing has been canceled due to the property going under contract. And I was like, that has to be a record.
Was it like significantly underpriced, or was it like just the market's that hot?
You know, I hate to say this, but it was like the perfect property for that client. Mm-hmm. Like, it would have been a great burr. It's what he wants to do. It was right by his house. He's in Towson. It was right around there. I look at the numbers. I was like, this is great. Like, we'll go today. Surely we'll be one of the first people there, but got snatched up.
Yeah, I had one on Friday. The client emailed me, and they're buying from out of the country, and so they're like, "Can you go see this property?" And I looked at the showings, and they were what I thought was blocked off till Monday, but I don't think it was blocked off. I just think every slot had been filled, and so I was like, "All right." I emailed them back. I was like, "I scheduled an appointment for Monday. That was the first available," and maybe 2 hours later, I got the notification from Showing Time that it was canceled because the property was now under contract. And I think that was the first day it was on market too.
I have a client who's at a pretty healthy price point. I think like the mid sixes in Montgomery County. And he has criteria about bedrooms, and he wants 4 bedrooms and a good school district and nothing that should be unreasonable. And I've run out of houses to show him, not only for him to buy, but like there aren't houses for me to take him to showings anymore. It's that brutal. And it's not even, I mean, prices are really high. But like there should be some neighborhoods that like would make sense that are in the 5s, but there's just whole neighborhoods
that have nothing,
just literally zero houses. So it's the prices aren't even the biggest problem. It's if someone wants to be in this area, in this school district, and walking distance to this, there's just nothing.
Yeah. Pre-COVID, we were already dealing with a extremely low amount of inventory, say 2 months, 1 month, and COVID immediately cut it in half. But now we're 2 years into COVID, and the inventory level, as measured by the number of units for sale, has just continued to drop and drop and drop. And I say number of units for sale because now measuring inventory in the amount of months that we have is going to be distorted. So 1 month of inventory is what we say it would take for every house to market to sell in 1 month. So if there's 5 houses selling per month and there's 5 houses on the market, that's 1 month of inventory. But as inventory continues to drop, how we measure months of inventory gets distorted because now the new stat will be in a neighborhood with 0 houses. 0 houses is 1 month of inventory, right? So as opposed to 3 years ago, it could have been 25 in a particular neighborhood. So measuring it in months of inventory now makes very little sense. And we should be talking about the amount of units per sale.
And do you think, because this is one of my theories, as interest rates rise, the inventory is going to get worse because you're going to have rate lock?
So I think we're going to have a few problems with. I think it will have a negative impact on inventory even further because, so if a seller in a house, let's say they're a $600,000 house they're living in, they're thinking about upgrading, and they have a
sub 3.
They have a 2.5% interest rate. Now, not only are they looking at upgrading, and maybe so they're in a $600,000 house, and maybe a couple years ago they were thinking about upgrading to an $800,000 house. Well, now not only is that $800,000 house $900,000, but now they're not looking at 2.5%. They're looking at 4%, 4.25%. So the cost compared to what they're used to paying have exploded so much that they're just going to stay in their home.
Put an addition on, whatever.
Yeah, they'll upgrade their home before they move now, and that's going to put further pressure, downward pressure on inventory.
So we should probably find a different business. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how we're going to make a living here over the next decade.
I think that what you just said, definitely at the beginning of the pandemic, people were they're like, oh, house prices are going up. Let me sell my house. I'll buy a bigger, better house. And now the prices have compressed to a point, gotten so crazy that they're like, wait, I can't afford a nicer house. Like, I'm not going to sell anymore. And it's just creating, like you said, with neighborhoods with zero. We were just talking about it. Canton has literally like 2 listings right now, and they're reasonably priced, but I don't know, they're going really fast. People aren't doing inspections. So I don't know what the deal is, but.
Yeah, I just read a stat the other day that there are only 6 million homes for sale in the country. And to put that in perspective, there's about 2 million residential agents in the country. So there's only 3 houses for sale for every agent.
That sounds actually very accurate. Based on.
And so obviously each of us needs to sell more than 3 houses to make a living. So yeah, it's a tough market for agents out there, and it's a tough market for buyers. It's an unbelievable market though if you are a seller and if you're planning on maybe downgrading instead of upgrading, right? So if you're downgrading, you muscle people out with the money that you've gotten from selling your house, and maybe you got to pay more, but it's not as hard as going to an upgrade.
And one thing that I've been fascinated by, I've been watching the Eastern Shore market for years, and what you have is not even actually downgrading, but and this is happening all over the country, right? You have people who they sell their house in DC for 1.5. Well, they can go buy whatever they want. And what you see is, so it spreads out too, right? You have these markets, and you're seeing this even in areas like Frederick. You just see the ex-urban areas get bid up because when you're coming from an urban area, an extra 50, 100 grand doesn't matter. And so you're seeing this price spread out all over the country I think we're seeing markets in the Midwest. Baltimore has actually benefited from this, of people selling and then moving to a different area and, bidding up the existing residents.
Yeah. It's almost as if printing trillions of dollars of money in a very short period of time has some sort of correlation to rising prices. It's unbelievable.
And a lack of housing inventory too. We
there's
also
a
just
number
have
of factors.
just don't have enough houses for people.
What you're saying, printing money is a bad thing?
I'm not saying it's bad. I own real estate. It's treated. But there's one property I'd like to talk about in American University Park.
Okay.
This property was listed at $1.85 million and closed at $2.65 million, $800,000 over list. And surprisingly, this is the only the second highest escalation I've seen in the last year, and this was $800,000 over list.
It's not even. It's nice, but did you see the kitchen? It's nice.
I actually did not look at the interior pictures. No,
it's like a nice house, but $800,000. You're just like, wow. I wonder who bought it. That's got to be a record, right?
It's not a record. The record was last year in Chevy Chase for a house that went $1 million over list.
Oh my gosh.
I got to wonder when you're a buyer's agent and you're telling your client how much to escalate. How do you say, I think we got to go $1 million over here?
Were these? I don't know. AU Park, was this underpriced or just that's just the market?
No,
I did not actually check it against the comps to better understand if it was underpriced or not.
I guess it was by definition.
Yeah.
You have to wonder though, was it the agent saying that, or did the buyers, they were just so obsessed with it that I want to be a fly on the wall, where they're like, we're just going for broke, we want it, and the agent's like, whoa, 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 whoa. They're like, we're just going to buy it, we don't care what it costs. Like a dream scenario for an agent, but you have to wonder.
I hope my client. Do you have any clients like that?
I wish.
And the one last year that was in Chevy Chase, I I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like a $4 million property that went for $5 million. That I understand, because if you're a buyer shopping in the $4 million range, there's no substantial difference to $5 million, right? But the difference between 1.8 and 2.6 million, those are very different price points for someone that's in the mid to high 1 million range.
Yeah. And once you get to the ultra luxury, those people, money becomes irrelevant.
Right.
I'm not saying, to be clear, like 2.5 isn't a ton of money, but it's not generally the type of person who's sitting on, tens of millions of dollars necessarily.
No, it's probably too often, right, a couple that both have very, very strong incomes, but they are not independently wealthy.
Right. They're not sitting on 30 million, 40 million.
Right. And that's why I say the price difference from 1.8 to 2.6 is two different classes of buyers altogether. That's a significant upgrade. I just can't imagine how desperate someone was to make that leap.
Well, I do think you have, and it's interesting when we talk about the market, and when you think you have some buyers who just get fed up and they're just like, get me a house, any house. And I do wonder whether that does, if and when inventory ever subsides. I do think I do not think there is a bubble at all, but I do wonder if some of the extreme prices that we've seen in the last few weeks could be, come down a very small percentage, because there is just, I think, some desperation in the market, people overbidding because there's nothing for sale. And
but there's not going to be anything for sale for ever again. So
forever.
I just lost out on this one property, and this was in the Eckington neighborhood, and I was 100% sure we had this property. So it was listed at $800,000, and granted, that's cheap. That's cheap for Eckington. But we bid to $175,000 over, thinking there's no chance it's going that high, and we were locking this thing up. Well, we came in third.
Oof.
What did it go for?
I should look it up, because I think it probably should have closed by now, but it had to have been at least 200,000 over.
Done?
It was redone maybe, 10 or 15 years ago. So perfectly livable, clean, but not like brand new shiny or anything. Did have I can't remember if it was an accessory dwelling unit in the basement or if it was a legal second unit, one or the other. So that's always attractive. But to be bidding $200,000 over in, I hate to say $1 million is a moderately priced neighborhood, but DC, it's a moderately priced neighborhood. So going 20-25% over the list price in a normal neighborhood seems like insane. And I've been bidding 100,000 over for a decade now, right? I am not someone that is shy about making big bids, and we're always used to 100,000 over in DC, but these $200,000 over just seems crazy.
Am I going to get multiples in my Brentwood flip?
So that's going to be a very, very interesting case study, because Brentwood is not a neighborhood that gets multiple offers. However,
nothing for sale.
At 725-ish, this is a pretty attractive price point. So it's a pretty attractive price point in a neighborhood that, there's not tons of people clamoring to get into. So it will be very, very interesting to see how that goes.
So you want to talk more about the Baltimore market?
I mean, sure. There's just no houses. It's not much to talk about. I mean, I think we're having those same neighborhoods we talked about on the last podcast. Your Fells Point, Federal Hill. I guess we included Locust Point in that now. Locust Point's a lot of very bougie condos, like Silo Point's over there.
That's cool.
Awesome. Silo Point is my favorite building in both metro areas.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I think that corner unit is still for sale. We've talked about the $4.5 million one that has a full turf field wrapping around it.
Will you rep me on that if I want to make an offer?
I think like you said, you have to show proof of funds. So pony up and we'll go see it.
Let me pull out my measly bank statement and see if that's good.
Do you accept tiers? I love that. Love that unit. It's amazing. But yeah, what was I talking about? Fells Point.
Yeah, no houses for sale.
No houses, yeah. And I think people are starting to, the margins, obviously, of what people consider, I won't use the word habitable, but a very livable area of Baltimore is spreading out, because people are wanting to get into, these areas in some capacity. They're willing to go a block or two over, which I think is the natural progression of things in general. I think that would happen over the next 10 years, it's just happening at an accelerated rate because people are so desperate to get into homes.
And so what are the neighborhoods you would say are the next neighborhoods up?
Well, I don't think it's like necessarily a change in the neighborhoods. It's just the borders of those neighborhoods are kind of pushing out. Like you see Canton pushing out into like Highlandtown and Brewers Hill. And then you see Fells Point. Traditionally, you'd have the highest priced homes right by the water, like in southern Fells Point. And you see that pushing north kind of towards Hopkins Hospital. Still downtown, not a lot of growth. Those mostly condos anyway. We know how condos have gone in the last year. So not much happening there. And then Fed Hill, just lots of redevelopment, condo conversions, et cetera, et cetera.
It kind of sounds like it's going through the same thing DC went through a decade ago, but kind of...
It's just happening very fast. I think that's the main word here is fast.
Well, I think part of that probably too is, right, some people getting priced out of the DC market, seeing similar, style of neighborhoods at significantly less prices. And right, if you were able to pay $800,000 in Petworth or Eckington, and now you're at these neighborhoods are at the $1 million price point in very short periods of time, as opposed to, sort of gradually getting up there. And you're like, well, maybe I can look at Federal Hill for $450, or $5 and be a huge baller at $5 in Federal Hill.
Or if you spend the same $800 in Federal Hill, you'd be a real baller. You'd be the person we talked about last time with the crazy roof deck that ruins everybody else's views. Have like a triple decker roof deck, a slide, fire pole, you name it.
Lazy
River, jungle gym.
And with the BW Parkway, it's not it's not a great commute to DC by any means. But if you're only commuting a couple days a week now, maybe Baltimore and Federal Hill and Fells Point is attracting more of these buyers. And a lot of the DC buyers might, are more likely to be cash than a Baltimore buyer. And so they might be muscling people out. And that's maybe why we're seeing sort of these big price jumps there.
Do you think Sara moving there as a trendsetter had any effect on the Canton market?
I do. She probably got...
Just look at the data.
Actually, I was going to say, I think since you moved there, it probably is up like, I don't know, 10, 20%. So you should tell people that.
I'm actually getting paid by the Baltimore town government.
I mean, they do a lot of bribes there. That's not a surprise.
Baltimore influencer. It's horrible.
You should change your Instagram to Baltimore influencer. I'm sure it's taken, but
probably, yeah. But no, Baltimore is great. People really love to make fun, including myself, love to make fun of Baltimore. But it's really cool, especially Canton, the neighborhoods we talk about. It's got that great feel. DC similar, some parts of DC, but it's affordable. There's parking. There's room for growth.
Walkable, dog parks. Right. Great. So that's what your buyer in these neighborhoods is very often looking for, is easy access to dog parks. I'm one of those people. I live across the street from a dog park.
And I think this is going to sound extremely obvious, but as Baltimore gets nicer, then it's a nicer place to live, right? I don't think Canton had quite the bar and restaurant scene even 5-6 years ago. And as it starts to gentrify, then this is what happened in DC, right? These neighborhoods that people would never consider living in became cool, became hot. The idea that Columbia Heights is
and then
what
you have
it
small
is.
businesses move in, chasing the higher income people that have moved into that area.
A virtuous cycle. Because, some of the neighborhoods in DC, you just can't imagine that they're now desirable.
Well, I think that's true of most secondary markets in America right now. Like you said, there's kind of this anti-urban diaspora going on. People are moving to Boise and Austin and all these different places. And now there's the cool food cultures following people. There's all breweries everywhere now in Canton, things like that, which before Baltimore would never been able to sustain more than one.
I think they've always been able to sustain beer in Baltimore.
Not crafty breweries, artsy stuff. Richmond, same thing. There's lots of the same type of stuff going on.
Lots of breweries in Richmond too. I've gone down there and been to a bunch of them. Richmond's pretty cool city.
Mm-hmm. But it didn't used to be like that.
No,
it was a sleepy southern town.
And, the people that I know that have moved to Richmond over the last decade are people that are, were my age range that just felt like DC was a little too expensive for them. But it's interesting because one of my friends moved down to Richmond and they also made way less money there. So it wasn't really particularly more affordable, but there was the illusion that it was.
People are making their money online now. So that kind of gets thrown out the window now, I think.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've got so many friends that have jobs where they're virtual and they always want to travel. And I'm like, I have to be here to actually do my job. It's a physical job.
You're the last remaining person who has to be.
Yeah, tied to a specific location.
Yeah, who's going to tend to the 3 houses on the market?
Yeah.
Not Russell.
Yeah, have you considered just becoming like a traveling realtor? Just so few houses, just get your license in all 50 states.
You know,
You might have to do that.
I wonder what it would take to get licensed in all 50 states. Most states you actually have to be physically present in the state to take the exam.
Like, that's fine. Business expense.
So like I've been meaning to fly back to Massachusetts to take the broker's exam there, which is stupid because the same company issues the tests are here as they are there.
Obviously, there's a lot of complications. You'd have to find a
That's how
sponsoring
they know
broker.
you want it. They want to know that you want it bad enough. You're willing to go. You should just get like an Airstream, just load you and your puppy dog up in the Airstream and travel all 50 states.
It'd be good content. We can all go. We'll all get an RV and it'll be good content.
Okay. No.
Can you, I've often wondered this. Can you like string together reciprocity? So you'd reciprocity with state and then find the reciprocity with the other state and string together all 50.
Yeah, so I've
considered that.
I have like looked to see where that string can take you. So like for instance, Maryland is fully reciprocal with Pennsylvania and Oklahoma, weirdly enough. And then you could look at what states are reciprocal off of those. And I've got 4 licenses currently. So it would be interesting to see if you could do it that way. It also would be hugely expensive, paying licensing fees in every state. Most of the time, you're going to have to be a member of an association as well as the MLS in each state. And there's 800 MLS systems. So like if you just joined every MLS system, I'm going to guess and say $1,000 a year, that's $800,000 in MLS subscriptions.
Cool.
You have to sell more than 3 houses.
You have to sell more than 3 houses. So it's not a viable business strategy, I think, for
That is the reason just the money? It's not that you don't have time to travel to 50 states?
Oh, that too.
Do you ever do deals in Massachusetts or you just keep it just to have
I do maybe 1 deal a year there.
okay.
Only on the listing side, can't show buyers anything. Usually for like family or friends. And I've got a nice system down where it's usually like 3 flights. I fly up for a consult, fly up for an open house, and I fly up for closing. And actually, the last couple times I didn't go to closing.
Okay, so you probably only do a certain price point to make up for that.
Yeah, and
Or it's like a friend.
Boston's a more expensive city than DC, so the price points make it worth it to do it. And it's also like the excuse to go up and see family and friends.
Right.
And it's only like $100 round trip flight, and it's less than an hour flight.
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah, my sister's in Boston, and her rent got jacked up like 25%, which I guess is not that much, but
I mean, that's a big price jump.
no, but I mean, like I think
25%.
no, but I think the national average is like 20, right? I think I read the national average is like 19 something.
Well, I think a lot of the big price jumps in rents are taking place not in the big major cities. I think it's right. So it's harder for, I'm going to do simple math here, right? It's harder to go from a $4,000 to a $5,000 rent. That's 25% than it is for say $1,000 rent to go to $1,250, which is also 25%. So I think a lot of the big percentage jumps are not necessarily in the cities. In many cities, DC, one of them, New York's another, Boston's another. The rents in the cities are actually sort of down while the suburbs surrounding them are experiencing, big price jumps. And actually I'm seeing that in my own personal portfolio. My rents in the suburbs are up, very strongly, and the cities are sort of, kind of flat.
I will say I was looking at rental comps in Canton yesterday. Baltimore's rents are really healthy. Like a 3-bed is like over 2,500, right?
Yeah, so employment, the major employment centers in Baltimore, I think will always be steady, and therefore you'll always have steady renters. I mean, people work at the hospitals, or they work for JP Morgan downtown. There's like consistent, huge employers in the city.
I do feel like a lot of the rents in like Canton, Fells Point, Federal Hill have come up a lot in the last 5 years. They've experienced a lot of rent growth.
Yeah.
And it's only surprising because they were flat for the decade before that.
But what, it comes with the same theory. It's gentrifying people, right? People who would have spent $2,500 in DC doesn't buy you that much, $2,500 in Canton. I think it
buys you a really nice house in Canton.
So I think it's that same. I mean, I was kind of thinking about buying a rental in Canton, but now, like as we have this conversation, it does kind of sound quite similar to the same type of stuff that we saw in DC a decade ago. High rent growth, new stuff moving in.
Yep. One thing
in Canton.
One thing worth mentioning, as we're sort of complaining about inventory is one of the strategies we've been particularly trying to pivot to, all three of us, is trying to find our buyers off-market properties, right? So right now, I don't know, Sarah's got half a dozen off-market properties she's found for sale. She's trying to match up her buyers to. Same thing with Jack. You've got a number of off-market properties trying to match your buyers to, and I am as well. It's a less stressful situation because we're not having to make an appointment to see it and it go under contract 4 hours later.
And honestly, I feel bad for a lot of my buyers. Like,
It's disheartening.
It sucks that they can't, get what they want at healthy price points. I also, we've talked about this before, there's something, I don't really think there's any solution to it, but I find it very hard to tell people, the price that you see on Redfin or Zillow isn't the price, right? Most people, they're shopping, they see a house at $6,000. I mean, anything else you buy, at least before, you go to the car dealership, right? Your car's $50,000. You go to the grocery store, your cereal's $3.
The actual price listed has no correlation to what it actually sells for.
And you feel bad telling people that, this house is perfect for me. It's $600, I can afford it. It's no, it's actually $650. And that's a new, relatively, we've always had bidding wars, but this idea that no matter what the price is, it's going to go 50 over list, that's really new. And I do think there's some, I don't know, there's still bad for the consumer, I feel
there's still some people that are, I think it's always been the case. So just 12 years ago, I was still bidding 10, 15% over to try to get properties. So I don't think it's that new. And there are still people that are overpricing and their house does not sell for multiple offers. And so we sort of have this, it's kind of illustrated, but there's sort of this wave that happens, right? So when the market gets hot like this, sellers get greedy and then overprice and then their properties sit. And then it sort of flows back and forth.
We saw that a little bit over the summer. There were properties that sat a little bit once the market had cooled off in the summer.
Yeah. And we saw more overpricing in the summer too, as sort of people expected month over month growth and they overpriced and it sat longer. It didn't mean they didn't sell, but they didn't get the prices that they think they were going to get.
That's another thing we try to find. I try to look for my sellers or buyers at things that are generally on for, at this point, more than a week generally implies there aren't going to be multiple offers coming in. And then you're not necessarily going to get a good deal, but you can come in at least around list and feel like you got a good shot.
Yeah. It's hard. I feel like it's counterintuitive in customer service to push your buyer in any way and be like, okay, if you want this, we have to act now. It feels wrong, but it's okay, if they want a place, you kind of have to.
Yeah. And let's talk about the conditions of which we have to buy these properties, right? Because they are not optimal, right? We're talking about
no inspection, no pre-inspection.
The reality of the market is you're not winning an offer with a home inspection. Yeah. You just aren't. And should you do a pre-inspection, do an inspection before you make an offer? It's hard to say that you should, because what if you do 5, 10 pre-inspections? We're talking about, $5, $6, $7, $8,000 we're going to be dropping if we're doing 10 pre-inspections on 10 different properties. That is a huge waste of money. So are you going to waste this money time and time and time again where you may not be getting this property? It's hard to tell people that, but the reality is you're not getting a house without an inspection. The reality is you may have to waive your appraisal contingency or make up part of it. And we had Kevin on the podcast, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and he made a very, very aggressive bid on this house. I think we talked about it being $125,000 over. He had no appraisal contingency, and he was incredibly lucky it appraised. And
it probably shouldn't have.
Yeah. The comps did not suggest that. There was no comps there to suggest that if we were only looking in the neighborhood. Luckily, the appraiser looked outside the neighborhood for other comps. But I had another buyer, no appraisal contingency. And this one we didn't escalate that high because this was in Olney, which is not as hot of a market. And we were only, I think, $15,000 over list. And the appraiser appraised it at list price and didn't go over. And it was actually comps to justify our contract price. But the appraisal came in low, and my buyer had to make up part of the difference on it. And it wasn't a particular problem for this guy, but it always sucks when you have to do that.
One strategy I think is possible is tell people to look under their max budget and then save some cash for I think we're all three pretty good at being able to tell, okay, is there a foundation problem? Is there something that, even without a home inspection, it's catastrophic? But, it's really hard for that inspection to know the situation of the HVAC or the hot water heater and so I think sometimes getting people to look below their max budget and then save some of that cash in the down payment for potential repairs down the road. Yeah, that's always a good strategy, but now more than ever.
There's actually an incredible stat this sort of leads into is 80% of home buyers experience a major unexpected repair in year one of ownership. So, right, a home inspection tells you what to expect. Yeah. You're still going to have an unexpected major repair in the first year of ownership. And I think the study had defined that as like a repair that was at least $1,500. Right? Owning houses costs money. Things break. When you're a renter, you don't have to worry about that. But as an owner, you're the one flipping that bill.
Yeah, I just finished my tax return for my rental property, and we spent about $8,000. And all $8,000 was things that wouldn't have been caught in an inspection, things that were working at the time and then stopped working. We had a new oven, a new dishwasher, which they were operational for the first few months, then they weren't. The HVAC was working, then it broke. The medicine cabinet was hanging properly, and then it wasn't. All those things, an inspection would have said at the time
they worked.
They worked fine, and then they didn't.
And let me tell you, dishwashers. I don't know what it is with dishwashers, but it is the number one appliance I replace. I am sometimes replacing a dishwasher in the same unit 2 years after I've replaced one. I don't know what it is, but
as soon as they separate from the casing they're in, it's like similar to a drum in a washing machine or a dryer. As soon as they separate even a little bit, they start clanging around, things get knocked loose. And there's also not that many dishwasher repair people as there are for other things, same as elevator repair people.
It's actually funny.
It comes down to economics, people.
It's actually really funny you say that. I was going to get the dishwasher repair, and there was it's like $400. I'm like, well, let's buy a new one.
Buy a new one, yeah.
Because it's like $500 for a dishwasher.
Yeah, I was like, well,
maybe you need to be spending more money on a better dishwasher that will cost more when you have to replace it because it's the same as every other dishwasher.
Do you think that's a good industry for us to get into when there's no more houses? Dishwasher repair?
Maybe, because they break them all the time.
Elevator repair people make a ton of money because there's like 3 of them in the whole country.
Seriously,
that's a legit statistic.
So you're having to waive home inspections, and we get it. It sucks. You're often having to waive appraisal contingencies or make up a certain amount on them. And you're competing against, sometimes it's just a few offers, but sometimes it's 20, 25 other offers out there. Sometimes it's cash. So if you're wanting to be serious about buying a house, you got to be waiving these contingencies. You got to be escalating high. You got to be escalating in large increments. And this doesn't necessarily guarantee you win it. So I mentioned Kevin. I wrote this offer for Kevin last year or the year before where we escalated in $25,000 increments against second best. And so we ended up as the high offer by that $25,000 escalation, and they still took a $25,000 lower cash offer instead of taking ours, which I think $25,000 is a lot of money to leave on the table. But so even if you're escalating, if you're the high by a huge amount, that doesn't guarantee you're going to win the bids.
And the one thing that Sarah said, I had this client, and I felt really bad pushing people up in price point because it's like a bad sales tactic. You don't want to tell people to spend more than they can afford. But the thing that is true and is advice I'd give to anyone, whether or not I was selling them a house, is like whatever the problems are now, they're going to be worse in a few months as interest rates keep rising. And that's one of the things that I like to tell people is that look, whatever your affordability is now, it's just going to erode over the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point because I've had this conversation with people where they don't want to get to a certain price point. And, I do very openly tell them, I'm like, whatever your price point is, that's fine. Just understand the next one in this neighborhood, this is the comp for the next one. So the next one's going to be more money, right? So you don't want to get to, I'm just making up a number here. You don't want to get to 500,000 in East Rockville. Well, the next one's 520.
And again,
the one after that's 530. The next one after that's 540. And your borrowing costs are going up. The interest rate now is 4. The end of the year, it's going to be 4.5. Next year, it's going to be 5, right? So, and that's not going to stop the prices from going up.
And that's thousands of dollars a year, right? I mean, 0.5% interest rate on 500 is $2,500 a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
So it's a shitty environment to be a buyer in, but you know what? After you own it and you're watching these prices rise and the interest rates rise, it's going to be sucking while you're buying it, but you're going to be extremely happy after you've owned it and then continue to see your wealth build as being an owner. And then 7-8 years when we go to sell it, if we sell it, and your house is worth $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, you know, a decade later, everyone always has the same inclination. I know it was hard to buy. I wish I had bought more.
Buying a house is like going to a dentist. Was that a good comparison? Maybe we don't want to put it that way, but that's kind of, it's like painful, but
painful, but you'll be glad
you don't
that
have cavities. You don't have.
Yeah, there's so many benefits to owning a house. And I think a lot of people, have you ever seen that like meme circulating of that guy crying in the shower and he's like, when you've been saving up for your 20% down payment on your $200,000 house.
Is that the Tobias meme from Arrested Development?
No. It's similar, but it's like, but now that house is $700,000. It's like, well, I think a lot of buyers still, even we're in like an information age, obviously, still think you need a full 20% down to buy a property. Well, you're wrong. You need all cash, apparently. But, but there's still many ways.
As little as 3% down. And you know what? I have won offers where I am 3% down, competing against the big guys. Forming relationships with other agents is imperative normally, but it's definitely imperative in this market. I've gotten the opportunity from agents I have relationships with. They get 2 offers. They're like, oh, I've closed deals with Russell before. He's easy to work with. He's going to get this closing. And this other offer who's higher comes from this agent who always makes things difficult. Their clients opt out of contracts. So I have been leveraging relationships to get more deals closed during this, which is imperative. But anyways, we're going to wrap up because me and Sarah actually have to go to a home inspection after we just said you can't get a home inspection in this market. Here's the key on this inspection. We've already closed on this property and we're doing it for informational purposes to understand what we need to repair over the next year at the property. Because again, this was a property we couldn't win with a home inspection contingency, but we're still going to do one after the sale of the property. Next week, we're going to be back with Natalie Collett. I don't know how to say her last name, Colladish. I know that's wrong. She's going to be angry I said it wrong because everyone fucks up her name, but we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the DC Real Estate Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to contact the hosts, reach out to them at info@dcrealestatepodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you access your podcasts.